Is there a cultural bias against having emotions, against being emotional? And if so, is this more prevalent among men or among women? That's the question and related questions we're going to be exploring in today's anonymous question. So welcome to Ask Sean, where I explore all sorts of questions about being human and invite you, the listener, to become more present to yourself, your relationships, and your life. I'm Sean Slevin, a licensed professional counselor and a licensed marriage and family therapist. And if you have a question for me, I would love to hear it. And you can send that to me anonymously at asksean.org. So as is my custom, when I'm responding to an anonymous question, I'm going to start by just reading it, and then we'll dive in. So this person writes, is there a cultural bias to avoid working through emotions? If so, where does that come from and how do we heal? Is this bias particularly true for men? Is Hollywood corporate marketing to blame? Spaghetti Western anti-heroes come to mind for me. For further context, I grew up with the misconception that counseling or dealing with emotions is not something strong people do. I now realize the extreme folly in that thinking. However, I think this bias impacts me and the rest of our society in really profound ways. For example, if any emotions start to bubble up in me, there is an internal voice that says, that isn't strong, so you must be broken. So the consequence is stuffing the emotion or covering it up. Your videos have helped me to begin to heal that ingrained thinking. However, I think it is deeply rooted. I wonder if you could talk on that topic, as I think it might help myself and others to let go of some unhealthy thinking. Further, if our cultural heroes are broken, can you suggest some positive examples of heroes or role models that exemplify wholeness? So, great questions here. Love the thoughtfulness this person has put into this, and also, thanks for your kind words, whoever you are. It's always encouraging to hear that my videos are impacting folks and helping them. So there's a lot here, and I think I'm going to focus actually most on sort of the cultural questions. I talk quite a bit in other videos about some of the healing aspects. So while I'll probably touch some on that in this, I think a lot of what this person's questions are more so emphasizing is they're trying to understand, like, how did we get here and what's the dynamic? And I think there's a real value in that. What's the old saying? Those that don't know their history are doomed to repeat it. So it can help us. It can be a part of our healing journey, our growing journey, to make sense of where have we come from? How did we get here? Now, obviously, that's not the only component in healing. There's hard inner work to be done, and to be done in relationships. So that's a big thing as well. But yeah, I wanna do some unpacking of kind of how did we get here, and yeah, kind of how do these dynamics play out in us, and are there differences in how this plays out between men and women, or in particular, I guess, differences of magnitude, because certainly there's stereotypes, right? If you're watching this, you probably are already thinking, well, I know the answer to that. It's harder for men, or it's harder for women, or it's more dominant in one or the other. And so I want to, kind of give some of my thoughts on that as well. So, and I'm trying to get in the habit of making notes so that it make me a little less rambly. So we'll see how that goes. Can't promise there won't be some amount of rambling, but yeah. So thinking about kind of where some of this comes from, I guess one of the things I want to start with is, this person who wrote in, asks, well, are movies to blame, are kind of corporate marketing, those kinds of things. And certainly I'm not letting any kind of companies off the hook here with what I'm about to say. But I think it's worth reflecting on that the stories that a culture tells in its films, in its literature, and in its marketing are a reflection of the culture itself. right? It can be easy to just be like, oh, the evil corporations, they're making us do unhealthy things. But the reality is, like, the evil corporations wouldn't exist if we didn't want them to. Like they are still culpable, right? Like, I'm not saying they don't have responsibility. Storytellers or marketers, whatnot. But the stories that sell, whether that's in films or literature or in terms of marketing, they're the stories that we want to hear. Otherwise, they wouldn't continue to be told, right? Now there is an exception here in that there are some true stories which do persist in spite of maybe like kind of what we're wanting to hear. But they don't tend to sort of dominate the culture, right? And so, I mean, when we look at a lot of our stories and a lot of our marketing, there are some consistent themes that indicate that a lot of what we want to hear is that we want life to be easy. We don't want to have to feel hard things. We shouldn't have to suffer. We shouldn't have to take responsibility for ourselves, it's like kind of the variations of our American fantasies are, how am I going to be rescued from my life? Whether it's through buying a product or taking a pill or having a certain kind of relational experience or, some cathartic encounter or whatever. And, there can be, as with everything, right? Like there's bits of truth embedded in all of that, and there's bits of goodness. My main point here at this moment is just to highlight that we don't get off the hook so easy by being like, Hollywood's been feeding us, telling us like the writer saying, spaghetti westerns, the anti-heroes, these tough guys that don't feel their emotions. So it's all Hollywood's fault because they told me those stories. It's like, well, those stories kept being made because those were the stories that we as a culture believed to be true and wanted to be true. So, yeah, we're not off the hook. I see, Hollywood and other types of storytelling and marketing, all of that as being largely reflective of the culture. It sort of tells on us, right? Again, those entities all have accountability and responsibility too, like they could still choose to be like, I'm not sure this is the healthiest story. Let's maybe tell a better story, a more true story, right? Let's invite, the culture into something better. But you gotta recognize, like, that would be a big risk, and would people pay for that? And given the that we don't have a ton of stories like that, it would seem to be that, like, nope, sometimes we won't. A lot of times maybe we won't. And so again, it's like, we have responsibility, we have accountability here. So, but let's touch on a couple of historical elements that have gotten us here. And I'm doing like oversimplification, quick flyby, right? So if you're a historian, try not to be mad at me at all of the things I'm omitting, or if I get little bits of details wrong. The spirit of what I'm saying, I think, is true. And I'm, going to try to be as detail accurate as I can, but we don't have the time and space. This video would be hours and hours long if I was, remotely thorough. So I'm thinking of a couple of cultural factors here. So one collection of things that I would lump all together for sake of this conversation is there's the Enlightenment, there's modernism, there's kind of, with both of those things, there's an elevation of what I'm going to call kind of sort of left hemisphere of the brain dominance. So, and again, this is a bit also oversimplifying, but the brain has a left and right hemisphere. The left hemisphere is oriented towards the ability to break things down into their components and to grasp them and to work with them. And the right hemisphere is more oriented towards kind of a holistic, integrated whole. In a sense, the right hemisphere is able to take all those components and put them back together again in a meaningful way. So we need both hemispheres of our brain, right? things get wonky if we are operating out of just one. We actually especially need our right hemisphere. We need that holistic thinking. If we don't have that ability to think holistically, then, I mean, you end up with like, crazy making situations where, it's like showing up at the DMV and they're like, "I'm sorry, you're not in our system." And you're like, "Well, but I'm alive right here." And it's like, "Yeah, but you don't check the box, and so you don't exist," or something. I'm picking on the DMV, but some bureaucratic institution where the person isn't able to like think outside the box to be like, "Oh, well, but there is actual human being here, and they actually do have some documents, and so just because they're not in my system doesn't mean they don't exist," right? Like, I mean, it's again an oversimplification, but those things actually do happen to people, right? Where, I mean, maybe you've been on tech support, calls, right? Where it's like, there's no ability to think outside the box or something, and it's just infuriating. So, that's some of the negative side, right, of like an overly, kind of left hemisphere, left brain way of thinking. But part of the gift of kind of modernity is that we had all these leaps and bounds in our ability to kind of break things apart and understand the world, right? I mean, so much of the modern world is built on that, like, oh, we could take apart this, we could take apart that, we could take apart atoms, right? Molecules, and like we're getting down into all of this fine detail. And so that's has been really useful. With all of that has been this elevation of, if we can just think properly, if we can break things down into their parts, if we can reason things out, then we can sort of rise above, sort of kind of the animals we once were, so to speak. And, there's things about that are good and that are true. But it has brought with it sort of a, I mean, many writers have kind of talked about and sort of, and for the past century or so have warned about, like, are we losing our soul? Like, are we losing our imagination? Are we making everything so thinking oriented and concrete that we're like losing our humanity? Now, there's also romanticism, which I'm not going to go much into at the moment, but just to say that's sort of been like kind of a counter kind of, I don't know if movement is the right way to put it, but a counter energy, if you will. But kind of both of these aren't terribly integrated, right? Like, I mean, romanticism can be sort of like, can tend towards the extreme of, well, whatever my feelings are telling me, that's absolute truth. And it's like, well, that's not actually true. My feelings can tell me all sorts of shit that isn't accurate. They're telling me something I need to discern and parse out, but they're not the ultimate truth. But then on the other extreme, it's like, well, no, I just need to think right. And if I can think right, then I'll feel better. And that's not actually true either, right? Like, we are thinking, feeling beings. We, just like with the hemispheres, like, we need a relationship between these two, and we need conversation. These need to be able to dance together, right? And so there's a bit of a reactionary, I mean, again, oversimplifying, but a reactionary quality, to kind of to these forces. And I mean, I think we're seeing this in our culture, right? Like, where things are swinging back towards a bit more of a romanticism, and there's more emphasis on feelings, and we're also seeing how that can go wonky. So it's, yeah, again, we need an integration here. The other thing that I want to name historically is that, like, for much of human history, it's been really fucking hard. Like, people have been fighting to survive, like trying to, like, not be eaten by wolves, not freeze to death in the winter. And so I think that's actually a huge element that we need to just really even just have compassion on ourselves, on our ancestors, even on recent generations. I mean, the Great Depression was not that long ago, folks. I don't know what age you are, you the viewer, but that wasn't that long ago in our history, when, tons of people were out of work, people were homeless, like massive amounts of people were homeless. I mean, the economy tanked and crashed in a way that I don't think we've really seen since then. We've had some, certainly hard times in other ways, in other forms, and we've had recessions. So it's like, thinking about like, what does that do to a person, right? To survive hardship. How does that entrench in them kind of a, like, I don't have the luxury to feel certain things, like, I don't have the space right now to, deal with my emotions. And then how that can get really stuck, I mean, I'm somebody who's deeply in touch with my emotions. And if you plopped me in a war zone, there's a lot of shit that I would not have the time to feel. And it would very much be how do I not get shot? How do I not get blown up, right? Now, me being me, at some point when I'm no longer in that, I'm going to be like, I got to fucking process this, or I'm going to be haunted forever. And I would be going back and trying to, like, okay, let me now feel through all that I didn't have the time and space to feel, so that nothing is stuck, right? But most people don't know to do that. And they also may not get connected with people with whom they feel like they could do that, right? They may not know that is an option. So this is what a lot of us have inherited, right? Like, our parents did the best they could with what they had, and they probably in many ways did better than their parents, Like, they probably did recognize some of the mistakes and failings of their parents and went further than their parents could. And there are ways in which, like, there's just shit that they haven't processed and that they're not going to. And that's sad, and that can be painful. Definitely has been painful for me. I have a lot of my personal therapy has been working through a lot of that, particularly because I'm such a sensitive soul. I feel things so deeply. I'm so intuitive. And so I've had a responsibility. I've had the burden and the gift of feeling a lot, having a lot of feelings to shepherd. And so a lot of stuff that I've needed to work through that my parents just can't help me with. And that sucks, and it's not fair. And they do have accountability in that. But it doesn't make them bad people, Like, it doesn't mean they don't love me, because they do love me. So, like, yeah, I mean, they're doing what they could. Now I can say that without bitterness now, because I've done a lot of work with this, but it has been deeply painful for me, right? Like, so I'm not trying to. Please don't hear me minimizing, right? I mean, this is a video, and things are condensed, If I was working with you in a session and, you were having big emotion coming up on any number of things I said, we would pause and hang out there, right? I wouldn't be rushing past. Sadly, I don't get to do that with this, right? Like, this is going out to however many people will see. So I am going to kind of keep clipping along. But please don't hear me minimizing or anything, or being like, so you should just be fine and it's just okay. And it's like, no, I mean, some of this stuff took me decades, like 20 years or more to work through. And some stuff I'm still working through, right? So, this shit takes time. But I think this element of survival and just our having a recognition that, like, that's just the reality, like, the further back in history we go, or just here in the present, we go to certain parts of the world, right, where people are in civil war, where folks are dying daily, where people are starving, right? Like, there's just a lot emotionally you're not going to have the space or the luxury, really, to engage with. And that's sad, but it's what is. And the amazing thing about us is that we can function on all these levels, right? We can carry on, even though there's, like, all this stuff we're not able to process, and maybe we don't ever get to process. Like, the fact that we can carry on at all, that we're that resilient, is, like, that's pretty amazing. So that's, I think those are the two main categories I guess I want to highlight in terms of, like, where does this come from? I think sort of the whole Enlightenment, modernism, kind of the left hemisphere dominant, kind of ways of being that have come out of that, tend to be a bit more prejudiced against emotion and sort of valuing sort of right thinking, right reasoning. And then the other element is this, just humans trying to survive and, whatever kinds of hardships, whatever kinds of abuses, whatever kinds of traumas. and not ever getting a chance to actually work through. And so then what they communicate either with their words or their actions is, well, you just shouldn't feel those things, because that's what's been the reality for them. Now, the cool thing about humans is that the story continues, right? And so just because, we've been having to survive, or just because we've inherited certain biases or prejudices against emotion, like that's not the end of our story. That's not where we have to stay. And particularly in the survival piece, right? Like all of these wonderful advances that modernity has brought, that science has brought, and so forth, the ways in which for many of us, we're not going to have nearly the like physical survival concerns that once would have been more common. So this creates the space now that actually we can feel this stuff, right? So this actually brings us into kind of another layer of why might there be sort of a bias against emotion. And that is that as we've developed as a culture, as we've developed technologically, as we've been able to make things more comfortable, as we've been able to, people don't die as much. We have medicines and medical treatments that we didn't once have. We have resources, access to resources that we didn't once have. Where we have failed as a culture is that instead of being like, okay, great, we do have the space now to deal with more of our emotions. Let's, as a culture, really make that a priority, right? Instead, we've been like, this is so nice. You know what? I want this to be even nicer, and I shouldn't have to work as hard, and things shouldn't be so difficult. And you know what? American dream is that like things should never be hard, and why are things hard? And I don't want to have to work, and I don't want to have to, struggle. And this is, this gets into something that if you've been following my channel, for a bit, you've heard me say before, which is that I think American culture is actually not pursuing, it's not the pursuit of happiness, which is in one of our founding documents. We're not pursuing happiness, we're pursuing avoidance. And so this is where, as a culture, we've been cowardly, honestly, and we've been lazy. And I say that including myself. Like there are places in parts of my life where I have been a coward and I have been lazy, where I have failed to turn towards the hard thing proactively. And instead, it was only when it got really loud and really costly that I was like, shit, I guess I got to deal with this now. Now, over time, I have learned through enough pain that like, you know what, this actually works better if I like start doing this, proactively, if I don't wait for it to blow up, if I don't wait for myself to like mess my life up or whatever, if I actually like, try to deal with the pain, early instead of late. But yeah, we, and this is, I think, is where it's sort of the most dominant note currently, right? Like I would say, I don't know, in the past 50 to 80 years, is that we've really, as we've achieved many things and we've been able to experience many, privileges, comforts, gifts, we've not used them well. We've used them just to become lazy and to be cowardly. We've like, it's been kind of tragic because we've kind of wasted it. We've wasted the opportunity. Like, like our forefathers and mothers, right? Worked hard, fought hard, sacrificed hard, didn't get to process their emotions on a lot of things, and set the stage for a lot of comforts that we enjoy. And we've done some good things with that, so I don't want to be too hard on us, but we haven't done nearly what we could have. I don't think we've been terribly faithful, honestly. And so I think that's where, where we need to change. To put it in Christian terms, we need to repent, which is just a way of saying we need to turn. We need to start turning towards the pain that we avoid. And I'll just say a little bit more about that because that relates to this, like, how do we heal question. I don't want to get too sidetracked in that because there's some more stuff I want to get into that were more, kind of bigger parts of this person's question. But yeah, I mean, how we heal is that like, well, okay, if I've been avoiding the emotion, how I heal is like, well, I do the opposite of that. I start turning towards it. Now you might think, well, that feels really scary. That feels impossible. And so then what that highlights is, okay, I need help in two ways. I need help in that I probably need somebody to accompany me who is not afraid of the emotions, right? That's a really key component. I need somebody less afraid than me, so that I can learn to be courageous in the presence of their courage. And I probably need some help in like breaking it down into smaller bites, right? It's not like you can feel this all at once. You can't build muscles all at once, right? You build muscles slowly, day after day after day after day. I think maybe I've mentioned in videos, I know I mentioned to a lot of my clients, I do kettlebell swings daily, and I don't do very many of them. I'm not doing anything fancy. I'm just doing basic kettlebell swings. And the amazing thing to me is that over just that daily, like I'm not, again, small amount of time, small repetitions, but over time, like I've gotten up to where I'm doing 100-pound kettlebell. Like, and I mean, you can't, I don't know how much you can tell on camera, but like, I'm not a bulky dude. I'm not naturally like big and strong. Like, it is wild to me that the body is that built for building strength, that just by doing this simple thing day after day after day, I'm not doing any crazy workouts or anything. Like, I'm just holding this thing and swinging it into the air. Like, it's like so simple. But like, yeah, I mean, my grip, my forearms, my back, my shoulders, my hips, like everything it's just wild how it's meant to knit together and to get stronger. And so it's the same thing is true in terms of emotional muscles. If you can break it down in small enough bites, and if you have somebody to support you, to accompany you, and you just keep at it day after day after day, like you will get more capable. You will get stronger. I mean, look, y'all, there are so many places in my life where I was paralyzed by fear. Paralyzed by fear and by shame and by pain. I mean, I think about something in my early 20s where I totally like failed out of something. Like I had, I won't go into the details for sake of time, but it was like a really big thing that I got admitted to and was going off to do, and I just couldn't handle it. Like I had so much come up inside of me emotionally, and like I felt so overwhelmed and so shut down, and I basically flunked out in a sense. It wasn't a thing really where there was grades, but that's the analogy works. And that was actually the catalyst that set me on a path to eventually becoming a counselor, because it was like, oh, I've got some shit here like that I did not know about apparently. Like it was very eye-opening. It was one of my first midlife crises in my early 20s. I like to get started on things early. So, but yeah, like I mean, yeah, I've worked really hard at facing hard things again and again and again and again and again and again and again. And I keep doing it because I still have edges. I still have more stuff to work on. We're never done. So it's just like whatever you think is impossible in you, you just don't know what you might be capable of. What matters is, what are you going to aim for? Are you going to give up and just be like, nope, I'm just not going to work on it. It's too much. I'm not going to try. In which case, that's basically saying I'm just going to die. I'm choosing to not live, right? That's just like, I'm not going to have any kind of a life. I'm not going to live my life. Or you're going to say, I don't know how and I'm scared, but I want to turn in this direction. And I'm going to find somebody to accompany me because I know I need help. And I'm going to keep trying. That's really the invitation is, will you keep trying? Will you keep trying? And this is where if I didn't have notes, I would probably pause, and that would be the end of the video. But I actually do have notes. I have more things to say. But that was a bit of an interlude on the healing process. And again, I mean, I say these things over and over in my videos, and in part because I need to say them again. I need to hear them again, and I know that you need to hear them again. We're creatures that need repetition. So, where am I? Yeah, so one of the questions that I think a couple of things, a couple of sort of related themes related to this person's question. So one is just, what is real strength? Like that. I think that's kind of embedded in a lot of this, and I've just kind of in some ways illustrated it. But a little definition here. This is like a work in progress definition. But I would say real strength is the ability to fully face and feel whatever we need to about whatever is, right? Like, so I think, how did I put it here? The real strength is the capacity to fully face and be present to what is, right? I talk about this in my What is Trauma video, which, if I can remember, maybe I'll like put that up on the screen here somewhere. But yeah, I talk about I think part of what trauma is where our psyche isn't strong enough to stay present to something, and so it gets fractured, right? And stuff gets split off in various ways. Pardon me. So everything I was talking about in terms of healing and building muscles, to work with emotions, is about building real strength. There is a kind of usefulness in being able to postpone dealing with something, right? If you're in a war zone, the fact that our psyche has the ability to be like, I don't have space to feel shit right now because I'm like trying to dodge bullets or whatever, like trying to not die, that's actually really amazing, and that's really useful. And then, as I've been said earlier, our responsibility is, once I do have the space, well, now I need to go back and feel all of that, because otherwise it's going to stay lodged in me, and it's gonna cause problems from the shadows, and I'll be getting triggered. I'll be having PTSD symptoms, and I won't know why. Why am I freaking out in this moment? So I owe it to the me that went through that trauma to go back and revisit it such that it's no longer traumatic. This relates to another thing I wanted to highlight, which is the difference between avoiding emotion versus choices about timing. So we can think about that certainly in terms of the survival example that I was just giving. But this also applies to situations where, like for me as a counselor, I have stuff come up, right? And, so I'm working with clients all day and their stuff, and maybe something from a session, it reminds me of something from me, or maybe I get a text, from a family member or a friend, and it's like, oh, that brings up some charge in me. And yet I'm about to see another client, right? And I need to actually really be present with them. And so there is a place for my being able to turn towards that, have feelings for a moment and be like, hey, I hear you, I feel you, whatever part of me this is, if it's, probably it's going to be a young part. It's usually the case. It's like, buddy, I see you, I feel you. I will come back to you, I promise. And right now, like, I have other things that I need to do. And so there, I'm actually setting a limit. This is where it's not romanticism, right? Romanticism, again, oversimplification would be like, well, I'm having this feeling, so this needs to take over my day. And it's like, that's actually not healthy, right? At the same time, the extreme on the other end is like, you're having a feeling, what the hell's wrong with you? Stop having feelings. I mean, again, these are extremes, right? Extreme oversimplifications, right? So what I'm doing here is I'm like, no, I'm letting myself have the feeling for a moment. I'm acknowledging it. And I am setting a limit of like, this actually isn't the time where I can really be with you. I mean, parents, you have to do this all the time with your kids, right? There's times where it's like, oh, buddy, sweetie, I so want to get down on the floor and play with you, or I so want to help you with this, but actually I like right now I'm driving, or right now, this, that, and the other. And then there are times where it's like, what, actually I am going to, I'm going to tell my client I'm going to be 10 minutes and we'll start 10 minutes late because I need some more time, right? Or, I mean, I've had times, I've never had to do this, maybe someday I will, but I mean, one of my therapists who, was hugely impactful to me over the years, I worked with him a good long time. There was a day where I showed up, I was there for the session, and he came out and said, hey, I'm so sorry, something just happened in my personal life, and I just wouldn't be able to be present here with you. I've got to cancel. And that was the right and ethical thing, right? Like, I was disappointed, of course, right? But it's like, he recognized his limits. And if I ever have something come up that is taking up that much space in me, where it's like I actually can't be with my client, then that's what I would need to do. So in the examples I'm giving, like I've always been able to be like, I can hold that and sort of like have that with me, but also not dominating, and like really be present with my clients and go on and help them do, really amazing work. But that's only possible because I do so much work outside of session, right? And because there's a lot of trust that I've built with my insides, right? So my parts know that if I say I'll come back, I really will come back for them, because I do. I've been very faithful about that. And so this is the difference between like a strategic choosing about the timing of when you engage with your emotions and to what level you engage with them versus an avoidance. An avoidance is, I'm scared of this, I'm pulling away, I'm pushing it down, I'm burying it. This is what some of the person who wrote in the question was alluding to, right? And you're not coming back. You're doing everything you can to avoid. And the only times you're sort of dealing with it is when it breaks through, it breaks out of its cage, and terrorizes you, so to speak, or you feel terrorized. And so those are two very different things. So I just I want you to have that category, right? That turning towards your emotions doesn't mean you have to be run by them, right? Now, the hard thing is when we've got a backlog of stuff, it gets messy, right? Like messy as I've said on other videos, like I have been like on the floor weeping at points in my journey. And not just one day, not 2 days, not 3 days, but like days and days and days and days. And so I'm having those times of weeping, and then like I'm collecting myself and I'm going to work and I'm being with people. And I did genuinely good work during those years. And I really helped people. Now, like, was it an intense time? Yeah, it was a really fucking intense time. Like, it was hard. My life at points was like doing all this work with myself outside of session and then being with clients, so going to my own therapy and doing therapy with clients, like, and I did not have space for much else because it was just like, that was what I could manage. Right. So, there can be really intense seasons. I'm not saying your season will be that intense. I have no idea what kind of stuff you're carrying. But the goal is to develop the ability to have enough support and to develop the ability that you can do it in measured bites, right? Like, I had some particularly hard stuff, and I'm a really big feeler. I've been given a lot of feelings to shepherd, and so that's part of why things looked the way they did for me. It's not necessarily going to look that way for you. I have no idea. I don't, I'm speaking to the whole world here in terms of making this video. So there's a wide spectrum of how this might look. But here's the thing, avoiding it doesn't work, and it doesn't. Like, you wouldn't still be watching this video if you were most likely. If you're like, no, avoiding's working fine, what's the point? Like, you're still watching because something in you senses like, yeah, it's not really working for me. Like, I probably do need to do something. Like, I'm having these outbursts, or I'm having these times of depression, or I'm having these times where, my anxiety just, is just wrecking me. These indicators that like, there's emotion I need to learn to actually be with in a constructive way, right? And so, yeah, avoidance versus like, there's definitely a place for strategic choosing of the timing and of the intensity, right? So, thinking some, I'm really liking having an outline. This is cool. I resisted this for a long time because it's like, is it still authentic? But this is all still my ideas and my words. Yeah, because I can only hold so much in my head. And especially this question is like asking about a number of things. There's no way I could keep that all straight. So I want to talk about the men and women. The men and women piece, right? So we definitely have stereotypes in our culture about men being less emotional, less in touch with their emotions, more avoidant of their emotions. And those stereotypes come from somewhere. They're not from nothing. There is something to them. A thing that is definitely true is that it is more socially allowed for girls to cry than for boys to cry. Now, this is this is changing, right? So I'm speaking more historically. But there's definitely a, we men often don't grow up with a category for like, what does a healthy masculine grief look like? And so we can really be afraid of our grief, of our sorrow. And it brings up all sorts of identity things, and am I a man, and whatever. So here's the interesting thing, though. Even though all of that is true, right? That doesn't actually mean that women don't also have biases against emotion. Women are more socially sanctioned to be emotional. Have displays of emotion is what I mean. I'm not trying to be pejorative there. Just mean adjectives, just descriptive here. But that doesn't automatically make them more in touch. They can be. There can be some qualities to that. But I don't know. It's interesting to me. This is maybe more my personal observation. I ultimately don't see much difference. I think there are various differences between men and women in general, right? I'm not saying that, but in terms of I observe in both men and women that there are places where both are afraid to go. And so even though there can be these historical ways that women are more socially sanctioned to display emotions, to be emotional, have an emotionality, I consistently encounter in probably every woman I've ever met that there are plenty of places where they're like, oh, but I'm not going to do that. Oh, I'm scared to do that. Oh, that would be too much. That would be too hard. In ways that really are identical, different details, but identical to what I experience in men. And so in that regard, I'm not sure there's really much of a difference. I think there's different stories we tell about emotions. I think there's different sort of social pressures and expectations about emotions. But I think both men and women have their places that they are just terrified to go emotionally, where they're terrified to feel things, emotions that they're terrified to turn towards. And so both are handicapped. I mean, I see it all the time in my marital work. Like the people come in for marriage therapy and be like, oh, we can't communicate. And it's like, yeah, no, communication isn't actually really the problem here. The problem here is neither of you are in touch with what you're really feeling and brave enough to actually bring that forward and share that with the other person. And it's fascinating, like, gosh, oh man, I could rabbit trail on a bunch of things here. Let me collect myself. Yeah, it's just, there is, there's just so many ways that I see men and women both. I see in partner relationships where they both are squelching emotions in themselves and in each other. It's very much this team effort. And so even if the woman is wishing the man was more emotional, and sometimes it's the other way around, incidentally. Like I've seen plenty of couples where it's like, where the man actually is quicker to get in touch with his emotions, and quicker to be vulnerable. And the wife is like, I don't want to do that. That's too scary. Like, it's really fascinating. So it's like, so it can, that can go either way. But regardless, whoever's the quicker to turn towards their emotions and towards vulnerability, there can be ways in which, the other person, male or female, will struggle with that. Or like, gosh, I mean, we can, I think about times where it's like, whether it's the man or the woman, a stereotype would be the woman saying, I wish he felt more. And then he starts to get vulnerable and to cry. And then she freaks out. She's like, no, but I need him to be my rock. And right there, and again, you could flip this, it's like I'm just giving a stereotype. But right there, what's being revealed is like by his being vulnerable or by the other person being vulnerable, it's bringing up in her or bringing up in this person, the person who says, I need them to be my rock. It's bringing up in them that, oh, there's emotions they don't want to feel. So it's we don't actually really mean it, is my point. We might say, oh, I want my partner to be more emotional. And then they start to be, and we're like, oh shit, put that away. What are you doing? So it's really interesting. Like, this is so much a tag team effort in our culture, right? Like, again, there are these differences. I'm not saying there aren't some kinds of differences and some socialization, differences. But underneath that, it's, to me, I don't know. Maybe there might be. I would love to know if there's data to the contrary. But my observation is that it's pretty equal. It's pretty egalitarian. There's an equal avoidance of difficult feelings between men and women, and I imagine also too that there are. Oh yeah, as I think about it, there's different pressures, right? So like for if the stereotype with men is like you can't cry, the stereotype with women is you can't be angry, right? And the reality is, men would be better men if they cried more. Women would be better women if they were angry more. Now that there's some caveats around that, like anger done healthily takes some work, right? You can do unhealthy anger, and that's just destructive. That's not good. It doesn't matter if you're man or woman. But like a healthy anger, like in a woman that'd be really fucking awesome. Like there's like a something really powerful about that, about a healthy anger in a man or a woman, either one. But so that's just one example, right? In terms of these societal pressures of like, you can't have this emotion, you can't have this emotion. So I think there'll be lots more things like that we could tease out. But my point is, I'm not sure that either side has it worse than the other. I think there's differences, but at the end of the day, we all have the same responsibility. Whether we're male or female, whatever pressures we grew up with, whatever our personality mix is, whether we tend to be real emotional or not very emotional, we still have the responsibility to like do something with what we've got, right? To turn towards what we have and to not push it down, and also to not like, have it rule our life, right? Pardon me. So anyways, that was the male female element there. So I did want to say a bit about better examples, so this person asks, okay, so who can I look to for examples of more holistic, more healthy, whole living and being, more integration emotionally? And so I'm definitely gonna need to tend to my notes here because I can't remember all this off the top of my head. I was thinking a lot of different examples here. Some of these I'll spend more time on than others. Some I'll just briefly talk about. This is something that I've thought a lot about because of, my own journey of like, well, who can I look to? My parents did the best they could, but man, just the way that I'm built, I've needed mentors way beyond them, right? Some of that is that I've found really good counselors over the years. And by really good, I mean counselors who were doing their own work and were really deeply committed to their own work. And so they were further down the road than me. They had things to teach me. And so that's a huge element, right? Like, these are people who are courageously facing the hard and the broken and bringing healing in themselves first and foremost. And then secondarily, helping me in my journey, right? But thinking about, I think that, works of fiction can be helpful here. I have been deeply impacted by the works of Tolkien and C.S. Lewis. So J.R.R. Tolkien, who wrote Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, and then if you're really nerdy, the Silmarillion and other ancient lore. So I know you're probably familiar with the movies. The movies are great for what they are. If you've not read the books really are better. Now, I know that's a common thing, right? The book is better than the movie. What I want to highlight here for a moment, and I think this is relevant to this conversation, is the books characterologically are so much richer. The movies are beautiful. The movies, I mean, they recreate scenes and whatnot, and even quotes, direct quotes from the books, which is cool. But character-wise, psychological, spiritual character-wise, they're compared to the books. They're kind of hollow, sadly. Hopefully, I'm not going to get flamed here. But they just don't have the richness and the characters. And so I have reread The Lord of the Rings at times specifically because I'm trying to understand things about being human from the way that Tolkien writes these characters. Lewis's works as well are really rich. They're a lighter read. That's one thing that is kind of nice about them. They're not nearly as dense and heavy, but also he understands human nature really, really well in his works of fiction. And of course, he wrote a lot of nonfiction, which is really insightful. But I highlight a couple of characters from Lord of the Rings. Gandalf is an interesting one. Something that you don't know from The Lord of the Rings, but this is something you would only know from the deep lore that Tolkien wrote, the background, basically, in which The Lord of the Rings exists, is that the character of Gandalf, who is like kind of this sort of kind of angelic being in human, old man human form, that he trained under this higher level angelic being who was... for lack of a better way of putting it, a master at sorrow, a master at grief, at sadness. This really informs the character of Gandalf, right? It helps us understand his gentleness. It helps us understand when he says to Frodo, when Frodo is kind of mad that the creature Gollum is still alive and keeps following them, and he's mad that his uncle Bilbo didn't kill Gollum when he had the chance. And Gandalf says... And Frodo says, it's a pity he didn't kill him. I'm paraphrasing a little bit. And Gandalf says, no, pity is why he did not kill him. It was his pity, his compassion on just this miserable creature that still is a living being. And he was merciful. And, spoilers, like that turns out to be the difference between victory and defeat in the end, is that it's precisely because this miserable creature Gollum, who's so broken and been so twisted and whatnot, because he was not killed, that's the only way that victory is achieved, because of things that happen at the end involving Gollum. But Gandalf can have that perspective, and he can have that gentleness and that softness because he studied sadness. He was not afraid of grief, of sorrow. And so like things like that, which, that's not, again, some of that you wouldn't even know from The Lord of the Rings proper, but there's a characterological richness that comes through with Gandalf, also with Aragorn. There's a sadness to his character, while at the same time a deliberateness and a confidence that's not bravado, but it's like, I'm gonna do what needs to be done. There's beautiful qualities in the hobbits. These ways in which they too, you see them evolve, and the ways in which they learn to grieve and to not be avoidant of hard things, and they become courageous. I think of the character Faramir, who is a disappointment to his father. He's not the bravado that his father thinks that he should be. And in his own compassion and mercy and kind of an act of faith, he makes a decision that his father curses him for. But again, there's like this. It's subtle, but when you read Lord of the Rings with an eye to these things, you see all of these rich textures to so many characters. And I mean, Éowyn, another one. She's got so many layers to her that's like, it's so beautiful. Watching her evolution, watching her pain, the period where she's a bit frozen and shut down, the ways that she softens and is able to grieve and to let go and to open her heart up to new life. So good literature, right, is one of the things that I recommend. is one of the avenues to helping our imaginations, right? Of like, what could it look like to be a more healthy human, to be a fuller human, to be somebody who doesn't turn away from the hard. The movie Arrival with Amy Adams is a favorite of mine. I'm not going to spoil it, but I've watched it so many times. It is one of my favorites. What you see in her is that she is somebody who, knowing full well that she is choosing a path of pain, chooses it anyway. Not because she's trying to make herself miserable, but because there's also joy, and she's not gonna turn away from the joy just because there's also going to be loss. And that is such a picture of what we are invited to become and invited into, to have that kind of courage. And it's just, that movie makes me cry every time. Such a good movie. A few other movies, just super quick. The indie flicks, Ink, The Frame, and Myth of Man. 3 different movies. And I'll try to put all of this into the caption description. But they were all by the same director, and they all are just emotionally rich and textured and about becoming more whole, and about resisting the easy path of avoidance. How badly do you want to become human, in a sense? A Monster Calls, the film, and there's a short book about it. It's a beautiful story, fantastical story about grief. And about getting honest with ourselves in the midst of grief. I also think the Spider-Verse films, the animated films, Spider-Verse films, are richly textured, and like characters that are feeling all sorts of feelings, doing courageous things, and you see what happens when a character in the second film who hasn't dealt with their grief, and how that leads them to be a little bit of a tyrant, which is a common pattern with us. Some nonfiction authors. Just gonna zip through these real quick, and then I kind of want to hang out a little bit more with one more person, and then I think we will wind down here in a bit, and we're going to have to, because I've got another session here in not too long. So Dan Allender, he gets the credit of being my first dipping my toes into any kind of counseling content. I will always be indebted to him for that. So he is a wonderfully real human being. Thomas Merton, Henry Nouwen, they're not in the counseling, they're not counselors, but wonderfully authentic writers. Robert A. Johnson, James Hollis, both of them are in the kind of Jungian schools of thought. Just have really wonderful things to say, wonderful guidance on how do we become more integrated? How do we turn towards the shadow parts of us, right? How do we grow up? I'll put some of those books in the caption. And then a massive favorite of mine, Clarissa Pinkola Estes. She wrote one of my all-time favorite books, Women Who Run with the Wolves, Myths and Stories of the Wild Woman Archetype. I found this book immensely helpful for myself as a man. It is, in 1,000 different ways, is about kind of the things we're talking about here in terms of like turning towards stuff you need to turn towards, doing the work you need to do. Richly symbolic book. Admittedly, not everybody's going to be ready for this kind of book, so choose your own adventure. But she's an amazing writer, amazing storyteller. So, final person I want to hang out with here, with y'all, is really the one who has impacted me the most, more than any other human, and that is Jesus of Nazareth. Now, some of you who haven't watched me before and don't know that I'm Christian, that was like a record scratch kind of moment of like, wait, what? Shit, are we going to talk about spirituality? Or we're going to talk about Christian faith? So, yes, I am. I'm not here to preach to you. I'm just going to share my heart and some of how Jesus has impacted me. I also want to acknowledge we're in a period right now here in American culture where the label Christian can mean a lot of different things. If you're imagining a bunch of bad things, give me the benefit of the doubt that, maybe I'm not associated with those things, okay? Ask yourself, if the energy of how you've experienced me and the kinds of things that I've said, do those really feel, congruent with, other kinds of jerky things that people maybe going by the name of Christian are doing or saying? So I can't begin to try to like tease out and unpack all of that stuff here, right? Like that would be endless videos. But I just want to acknowledge like that's a huge elephant in the room, right? So I think as I talk about Jesus, the impact of Jesus, the impact of this God on me, because I do believe that Jesus is God, which you don't have to believe. I'm just telling you where I'm coming from and why that matters to me. I do think as you hear how I talk about him, that'll help you understand the kind of Christianity that I'm coming from and that I believe in. So, yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of different things I could say, but I did have a couple of notes so I could stay focused, not rabbit trail too much. But I mean, one of the things that is really impactful for me about Jesus, just a brief aside, right? Like, so Christians believe that Jesus is God, that God is three persons, but is one being. None of us know how that works, but there's this whole idea that God is both Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. There's a mystery there. I'm not going to explain it because I don't get it. I don't know how that works. But Jesus is God taking on human flesh, right? So just establishing, you don't have to believe this, but this is historic Christian, beliefs, right? So one of the things that Jesus does is he shows us the tears of God. He literally brings the tears of God down to earth. And for me, as somebody who has had my own suffering and my own struggles, that's been deeply meaningful, right? If I'm going to believe in a God, I need a God who weeps with me, who weeps for me, who weeps beside me, right? Like, who isn't afraid of the places where I'm afraid. One of the ways that we see this, and just to give a couple of examples, right? One of the ways that we see this is that there's this moment in the scriptures where Jesus is approaching Jerusalem, and he knows, because he's God, he knows that he's going to be handed over and he's going to be executed in what was the most effective, cruel way that they had come up with at that point in history. He's going to be nailed to this cross in this very horrific kind of way, publicly humiliated. They would be naked when this would be done to them. And it was like a really, really horrific, slow, awful death. And so he knows that's coming, that the people that he's come to offer life to and healing to, that they are going to turn on him and they're going to hand him over to this fate. And so he's approaching the hill to Jerusalem. He sees it in sight. And you're okay, what kind of emotion is this God going to have in that moment, right? If there's any of us, would be like, what the fuck? Like, why am I bothering doing this? Like, they don't even appreciate me, and they're gonna just like do horrible things to me. Like, peace out, like why would I do this? I mean, there's any number of variations where we wouldn't respond great to that, and we would, if we're honest, we wouldn't go through with it. What does he do? What does this God do who knows this is what his people are about to do to him? He weeps. He weeps for this very people who are about to torture and murder him. And he weeps in part because he recognizes that the pattern, the ways of being that this group of people is going to enter into that will lead them to execute him, that they will continue in that pattern of being for a number of years, such that will lead to further decisions that will end up in Jerusalem being destroyed, which does actually happen. That's a historical fact. And so he sees that coming, and he actually makes statements to that effect, and not in this like, oh, you're going to get your just desserts. Like, there's no tone of that. There's this like, oh, if only you would have turned your heart. If only you would have softened. But I know that you're not going to. and I know what's going to happen to you. And it's just his heart breaks. Like, don't you want to be that kind of person that has that kind of love for your fellow human, that can be with emotions such that, like, instead of cursing your enemy, you can see the misery of where they are and you can have compassion on it, right? I want to be that kind of person, right? I want to be that brave, that noble. I'm not saying that it's easy, but I think it's good, right? So another example. There's a story in the Gospels where one of Jesus's close friends dies. And in this story, and look, okay, the Bible's a wild thing. I know if you're not a Christian, you might be like, oh, all the supernatural stuff is bullshit. Just take the story, like, even if you don't believe, listen to the implications of the story, right? Even if you think these are fictions, let them still teach you something. So in this part of the gospel story, Jesus' friend has died, and Jesus, when we read on, we discover that Jesus raises this friend from the dead. Well, that's kind of a wild thing. It's a precursor to what will happen with Jesus. Jesus is executed, and then Christians believe, I believe, that he was raised from the dead, which that might have implications for all sorts of things. So again, we would think, okay, he knows he's going to do this. He's got these supernatural powers. No big deal, right? And yet, when he arrives to the grave, what does he do? He weeps. And it uses a word in the original languages this isn't like oh, a tear. This is like wailing. Like, he does not, here, even when he knows he's about to answer death with resurrection, he does not skip over the sorrow. That's, for me, that has been formative. It's like, you can't skip over the sorrow. To get to joy, you have to go through grief. Like, that is a fundamental principle of the universe, I believe. To get to joy, to get to peace, to get to contentment, to get to all the good stuff, you have to go through the grave. You have to be willing to descend down and die in order that you can be resurrected. I mean, this is part of what's compelling to me about Christianity, one of the things. Along with this, right, like, implicit in all of this is like, this is, and so, I am saying some things about why I believe Christianity is true and why I find it compelling. And I want to talk about how is this an example for me on how to live, right? Like, this is part of the question this person was asking. Like, who are our heroes? Who can we point to, right? So this is a God who comes down and suffers with and for us. I want there to be a God like that, right? Somebody who loves me that much, right? Somebody who would show me the way, like, who would say, hey, look, I know this is scary. I know that it is hard. I know that it involves dying, a kind of dying, because it does feel like dying when we face our emotions. It's felt like that for me many times, many, many, many times. And so for me, having somebody like Jesus, who it's like, okay, maybe I can make it through this. Maybe he'll bring me back from the dead. Like, I have no better hero than that. I have no better model for how to be human than that. For a being that doesn't shy away from anything beautiful or anything ugly, but looks at it all. I'll say one more thing, and then we got to start to wind down. Jesus also shows us what does a healthy anger look like? That a healthy anger has to be rooted in sorrow. We see the implications of this when he's overturning tables in the temple. It would be easy to think, oh, Jesus is just losing his shit. This is God being triggered. And yet, if you look at the whole of Scripture, and look, the Bible is freaking hard to read. It's all kinds of different literature. There's lots. I don't have time to unpack all of that, right? But But when you look at the whole of Scripture, what you see again and again is the places where God is angry, he's angry because of how humans are treating each other. And the theme over and over is God says, I want you to care for the poor. I want you to care for the widow, the orphan, the immigrant, like basically all the people who would be at most at risk in the ancient world. All of the people on the fringes, all the people who are, anyone who struggles. God is saying, you better care for them. And if you don't, I will be upset with you. Not because he's a meanie, but because he loves human beings. It's like, these are my children. Do not treat them this way. And so, in the context of that, how we're meant to understand Jesus overturning these tables is that the temple was meant to be a place of worship and a place of refuge, a place of nourishment. And these money changers were basically defrauding people. They were cheating people. And I can't go on all the details of that, just for simplicity's sake and time's sake. And so he has this fierce anger because of his love for people. And so that, again, that gives me a glimpse of, okay, if I'm to be angry, my anger can't be self-serving. It can't be like, you did something I don't like, and right? It can't come from a triggeredness, right? It has to come from grief. Healthy anger always has to be rooted in sorrow. Healthy anger has been purified by sorrow, been purified by grief, been purified by sadness. And healthy anger is actually necessary for the flourishing of the world. It's hard to do. That could be its own video, right? Like talking more about that. But again, to the question of, okay, who are people that we can look to? And I would say, whether you're a Christian or not, look at the person of Jesus. Look at how he lived his life. Like, really look. And even if you don't believe in the supernatural, even if you don't believe there's a God, take these scriptures, take them on their own terms and say, okay, well, these scriptures are presenting this as if there is a God, and as if this God would come down and take on human flesh and would come into poverty in Palestine. It was a conquered nation at the time, occupied by the Romans, who were a pretty brutal empire, and mastered, public execution horrifically well. Like, this kind of being comes down, takes on flesh, and suffers with and weeps with his people. Don't I want to become somebody like that? Don't you want to be somebody like that? Don't you want to have that kind of character? That ability to sacrifice, that kind of courage, that kind of faithfulness? I do. I want to grow into that. Like, that's more inspiring than any movie, any story I've ever read. So yeah, I'm going to leave you with that. I know it may feel like a hard left turn here into spirituality and Christian faith stuff. I hope you hung with me. The point here isn't to preach at you. The point is to invite you to grow into healthiness. And I really do think that the person of Jesus is, he's the most compelling model I have ever found. So I commend him to you for you to look at and to pattern your life after. Well, we have covered so much ground. You may have questions coming up inside of you. You may have frustrations. You may have accusations, whatever. All of it's welcome. Obviously, I can't promise to respond to every single thing that is sent. But I would certainly love to hear from you if you want to submit anonymous questions or comments, whether it's just something you want me to know or something that you want me to respond to, in a future video. I would certainly love to hear from you. So until next time, peace be with you.